Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Holistic Human Performance Podcast. I am your host, Gena Bradshaw, and we have a special guest today, Ciara Shea.
Hi.
Hi. Our story is so interesting the way we kind of met.
Yeah.
So Ciara, for those of you who don't know her, she is all in the holistic nutrition and lifestyle industry. And we went to the same college, Ithaca College, and didn't even know that, but not at the same time.
No.
And then so that happened. And then when I was teaching at the Spirit and Soul Retreat over, was it the summertime? No, fall.
No, October.
You were there, and like I knew you looked familiar, but we followed each other on social media, and then I put two and two together, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I love her information. She's a rock star. I love her podcast. I love what she's doing. And it was just really funny that we reconnected there, and then figured out later that we also went to the same college.
Yeah. So you had posted something on your Instagram story because they send out like a little magazine, like the Ithaca Bombers magazine. And I was like, wait, why do I know that magazine? I was like, wait, you went to Ithaca? That is so crazy. Like, it's kind of a small school. And
yeah,
unless you're like actively in college, you don't really talk about it. So that was just, I don't know, that like really warmed my heart.
Yeah, to know that you're a bomber, I was happy with that.
Yeah. And I was like, I was president of the dance team. I choreographed, well, not the dance team, the hip hop dance team. And I don't know if they're still there when you were there, but anyway.
I feel like they were.
I feel like they were. Yeah, track and all that, right?
Yeah. And I ran track and field. So it's like, we just instantly bonded.
I love it. I love it so much.
Thanks for coming on. I really wanted to have you on in particular, like, because I love everything that you're putting out there. You have a very educational base, and you've also gone through things in your life that have brought you to create the business that you have today and the podcast. And I kind of want you to bring us through, because I find at least that people who end up in the holistic healing, wellness space, fitness space, health space, they've suffered from some type of adversity, whether it be themselves, someone they know, caused like a lot of trauma. And I wanted to bring you on to chat about it. So why don't you tell the listeners who you are and kind of how you got into what you do today?
The story is so long, and I will like do the best I can to kind of just bring up the most important pieces.
Yeah.
So I'm Ciara. I am the owner of ORA Nutrition and Wellness. I am the co-host of the Fiercely Holistic podcast. I am also a Juris Doctor awaiting admission for the New York State Bar, which is like, you'll hear the story in a minute. But so I went to college, I went to law school, like I graduated at 24. I came home to sit for the New York State Bar, and my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I'm her only child. So I have a sister, but we share a dad. And for me, it was almost like a no-brainer. Like, what am I going to do? Go and sit for the bar again and like pretend to have a career and like leave my mom and not take care of her? So it was a no-brainer. I withdrew from the exam and I took care of her for the next 8 months. And unfortunately, she passed in that time. But one of the things that I saw for the first time ever was how incredibly broken our medical system is. I remember our very, very first appointment with her oncologist at Sloan. He had said, he didn't ask any questions about like her trauma or her stress levels or her diet or like mold exposure or anything. And my mom grew up in foster care, was a heavy drinker. Like, she had so much trauma, so much generational trauma that she carried through, so much numbing that she did through drinking, because she didn't know how to manage any of those big emotions. Like, that is an aside, but the medical system doesn't ask that, partially because they don't have the time, and partially because that's not where their education is. And that's okay, right? Like, our modern medicine is honestly the reason you're here. And so it's beautiful.
I was going to say, side note, I also went to Memorial Sloan, and I'm going to say, I love my oncologist. I think he is great. But when it comes to the other, like they don't care about anything else. Like that's not their job.
Right.
So, and I had to learn to also be, well, I'm sure go in this direction of like becoming more spiritual, and then also being more, that opened my eyes to being, instead of angry at the medical system, it was like grateful that I even get the fact to pay, for great
Yes.
health insurance and be able to see doctors because of it, but I totally agree with you. Like that's also what opened my eyes, where I was like, ooh, our system's really, really broken. Even though I knew this before, it was, a different bird's eye view. And I'm like, people don't know about other things that are out there, which I'm sure you'll get into, but.
Yeah. And so that for me was like super, super eye-opening. And then, throughout her medical journey, it was just like one insult after the other. And through it, I love learning. I'm like, I'm going to learn everything there is. Like, I'm just going to learn this from my mom. So I found Chris Carr and like Crazy Sexy Cancer. And I was like, okay, we're going to do your morning shift. Yeah.
I am so happy that you found her. Like, oddly enough, I was on another podcast, the Strength Coach podcast. I don't know, maybe like last year with Anthony Renna. And he mentioned after, we were done recording, he's like, you should look into Chris Carr. And I'm like, I've never even heard of her. So the fact that you like found her, like however many years ago, right?
Now it was over so my mom's been gone for 10 years. So 11 years ago.
The
and I
bought all. She's been around for that long. Like I just love so much. Anyways.
Yeah. So that was it. That's how I got introduced. And then after my mom passed, to say I was devastated was an understatement. And there was no way emotionally I could handle sitting for the bar, getting an actual job, working 90 hours a week, because that's what you do as a new lawyer. And I was like, what is my purpose? That's not it. And I was grateful that I had the opportunity to take a little bit of a break in life. And by break, I mean, I was healing. I was like really healing and going to therapy twice a week and like doing all the stuff. And just so you know, at this point, like for me, my diet wasn't impressive. I didn't really know outside of what I learned just from like eat more veggies. And I was a vegetarian at the time. And like, I thought I was doing the right thing. And so my sister, my half sister, who is an acupuncturist, had a patient of hers come in and tell her about the Nutritional Therapy Association. And I was like, oh, I'm interested. Tell me more. So fast forward, I ended up going back to school like a lunatic after I was just in school and law school. I'm like, just so crazy. But honestly, I found my people. I found a new way of living that was so empowering to be able to learn like, hey, listen, what you eat is so important, and what you fuel your body with is going to dictate how you feel. So I think that was the beginning part of my journey. And now where I am today, I'm actually like, yes, it's about the food you eat for sure, but it's also the stress you carry, how well you sleep, like the friends you have, like your daily habits. Are you getting sun? Like all of these things, community, finding people to be expanded by and say like, okay, I'm not alone, right?
Nutrition was just your entry point
Totally.
into all the other levels.
Yes. And so I'm actually taking a course now taking a super deep dive into the nervous system and the vagus nerve specifically, just because so many people that I was working with, so many clients of mine, were just hitting plateaus. Like literally they were doing all the right things. There was nothing else they could tweak about their lifestyle, their diet. And I'm like, what is going on? Most of them were moms. And I'm like, oh, their nervous systems, they're just so dysregulated. So also for me, to be able to teach my own self how to regulate my nervous system, because after the death of my mom, I was a wreck. It was a wreck for a very long time. So that's like the long and short of my story. And then somewhere in there, I decided to take the bar again, and I passed, and it's been like a 2-year journey getting my application in, and now I'm just waiting to be admitted. So that's really cool, and I'm like super grateful. But yeah, that's like my overarching story, and I know I definitely want to talk about my mold experience. So is there anything I didn't touch on that you want me to expand on there?
No, I think that was great. And I also just want the listeners to know that, again, my point, like it's just so fascinating. Every person that I've had on, every professional has had this low point in their lives. And they all say, I had to get to this point in order for me to learn all of these experiences, myself included. And they create something so special because they are so passionate about it. And I'm just really glad that you're sharing that passion and you recognize that nutrition was just your entry point. And there's so much more. That was the same with me with fitness. I'm like, there's more. And then also, going through thyroid cancer, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm an athlete. I eat healthy. What else is there for me to do? And that's where spirituality came in and the human energy system, energetic anatomy. And I'm like, oh shit, everything's connected.
It's all connected, and you can't like limp your way through life. You need to like take a really bold look at yourself and really examine where can I improve. And some of those, sometimes it's not visible to you until it is, so yeah, it's so true.
But this is why we go through the healing journey. Like, you came to the retreat for a reason, like you were there, and that was a profound healing with a group. It was a beautiful experience when we did this retreat. And, I think it's so important also for the listeners to know that the healing journey is not easy and it's not comfortable. It makes you really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's not linear. Like, you also will like regress sometimes. I'm actually in that space right now, and I'll talk to that in a minute, but it's hard. It is not for someone who is weak at all. And if you are in the throes of a healing crisis or in your journey or in the very beginning stages, you are so brave to even walk that path, because it's hard. It is just hard. There's nothing else to be said about it.
And you're in a territory, like you're in an unknown territory. You're like foreign territory. You're like, I don't know which way to go. Can someone help me, please? That's where the spirituality and energetics plays a role. It's like you need these guiding points. So when I recently saw you had an experience with your health, which got you to this point right now, and you're really taking a deep dive into it, and also me taking a deep dive into cancer in general, mold is something that you have experienced, and I think is so underrated. And it's coming out now, more people are aware of it, but mold exposure can literally cause cancer. It can be so toxic that it causes cancer to the body. And I do speak about this, and I'm really glad that you're being vulnerable and, sharing your story, and you're literally bringing people through your journey. And I think it's going to be really helpful because, again, I speak about this in the Cancer Fear Freedom program that I'm doing. Mold is like part of toxic environment. Like, if you need to check your home, you need to check, when Ciara gets to her story, you're going to be like, oh my God, I didn't even think to check there. Yeah. So why don't you take the people through that? Because I think more people are exposed to that than anything. And it's also a foundation of how you can literally create disease in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And so thank you for honestly giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I feel like even on my own podcast, every time I wanted to talk about it, I was so in the throes of whatever the thing was. I just wasn't really ready. So I actually think this is the first time I'm actually sharing the full story in any one spot. So this
you're so welcome. This will be very therapeutic for you.
Yeah. I'm like not promising that I'm not going to cry. I'm also like a very emotional person to begin with. So
that's okay.
Yeah. So in 2015, I bought a new car. For legal reasons, I'm not going to name the company, but know that it was a German company, and that's going to be important in a minute. Bought my car, it was brand new, and we had the car for about 2 years. Then I gave birth to my daughter, and I started having these weird eczema patches on my hand about 3 months postpartum. And I never had skin issues before. I never was on any medication. I always had a really healthy body. I never had a cavity. Like, I was in pristine health my whole life. And this eczema patch kept getting bigger and worse and spreading, and like to the point where I would maul my skin at night. I mean, when I'm telling you levels of torture, like skin conditions like eczema are one of those things where they're very hard to pinpoint what's causing them. You tend to get a lot of misdiagnoses, misdiagnoses, and they control your life. So I'm like, was it giving birth? Was it stress? Was it breastfeeding? Is it something I'm touching? Is it something on her? Like, my mind was going crazy. I want to fast forward to COVID, and the world gets locked down, and I stop driving my car, and my hand completely clears up. So I got my car in 2015. So now the car is like a couple of years old, and 2020 is when we're shut down. And I'm like, wait a second, like, is it my car? Like, is that even possible that it could be my car causing me all of these issues? And I want you to know, I went to every specialist. I went to every dermatologist. I went to every regular doctor. I went to every, alternative healer, chiropractor, acupuncture. Nobody knew. Nobody knew.
No one, just out of curiosity, because I know this is part of protocol in some naturopathic doctors or holistic doctors, protocols. They didn't do any mold testing?
No one.
That's crazy.
No one. And I've known my whole life that I have an allergy to mold. Like, I'm allergic to penicillin. So, like, I've known that. And anytime I've gone to a doctor, they say, like, do you have any allergies? Nobody has asked that. And for me, I was like, we got our house checked. Where I was working at the time, I was like having them check. I got air filters for everywhere. Nothing made a difference. And during this time, like, it was really stressful, but also I was starting to get panic attacks. This was like a new thing for me that I never had again in my life. Like, my nervous system was probably already dysregulated from losing my mom and then stress in my family. And then I started getting like really intense anxiety driving, and then panic attacks only while I was in the car. So now COVID hits, we stopped driving, my hand clears up, and I was like, this is wild. So we ended up getting the car tested. And the company said, your car is filled with mold, not visible. It was in the AC units. So like, it wasn't you couldn't see anything. It wasn't in the vents. It wasn't on the seats. It wasn't on the steering wheel, but it was so bad that the company bought the car back at full sticker price. Okay. So we're like, oh my God, this is crazy. So part of me is so grateful that I now like know what this was, but I was tortured for years in that car, not knowing and exposing my child. And thank God my daughter had no effect whatsoever. So this is the other thing that I actually want to take a minute to say. People could have different symptoms. My symptoms came through my skin and was like my nervous system dysregulation even further. So like the neurological things with panic and anxiety. Right? But for other people, they may not have those things present. Maybe you're going to get achy in your joints. Maybe you're going to wake up with like a flushed face. Maybe you'll have super puffy eyes. Maybe you'll gain weight. Maybe you're going to be tired. Like, they could be so many different symptoms that come up from mold exposure. So the story like doesn't end there. I really wish it did. I was like, okay, now that I know the car had mold and the mold caused my eczema and the mold caused my panic attacks and anxiety, now I just need to start doing work on it. Yeah. And I started healing my body. I was working with different practitioners that were specializing in mold detox, but nothing touched my panic and anxiety. Like, it got to the point where even when we got a new car, I was now not able to drive on certain roads that I had a panic attack on. Like, my survival brain was like, absolutely not. You're not driving there. You had a panic attack. You're not going to go back. And this was super new for me. So I was like, I don't even know what to do with that. So I went to, my regular therapist. I tried EMDR. I did neurofeedback, which was with a chiropractor that did like functional neurology. Nobody was able to touch the surface of my panic attacks or my anxiety. And it's still something I'm trying to work through to this day, even though I've been out of mold for that long. So I have been working with different practitioners, and one of the ones that I'm working with now just to detox the mold, I started getting really like all my symptoms back again. And what that means is that there was mold literally colonized in my body somewhere. Like, it lives in the gut, it lives in the brain, and it's really hard to get out of your system, and also could be very dangerous. So like, I don't know if you see around my mouth, this is also a healing crisis that I'm in. I think when I had posted on Instagram, I had like a little dot on my eye. My eye started blowing up again. I mean, it was crazy. It was almost like I was in mold again, even though I wasn't. And I know you could relate to this feeling of PTSD. I think you were talking about it, like the fear around having cancer again. For me, the fear was like, oh my God, I cannot have eczema again. I cannot go into the throes of this again. It was horrible. It was 2 years of nobody being able to help me. So it has been quite the journey. And I think there are a couple of pieces to this that makes it really challenging. Number one, people think they're educated and are not. So people call themselves like mold experts or mold literate. They're not. They just don't get it. They don't even get the beginning stages of detoxing from mold. And I think there's a lot of fear around it. So it's like for a lot of people that you try to find community with that are also going through mold, they're like, you need to get rid of everything, your house, you need to move, you need to get rid of all your clothes, all your furniture. And you're like, wait, I don't have millions of dollars to like replace my car, my house, all my clothes, all my furniture, like that, all my pictures. So there's like a spectrum of people that really get terrified of living and being in mold. And we are going to have to live with mold. The rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with mold, not in mold, but with mold.
Right. And honestly, mold is already everywhere. Like it's everywhere. It's, even if you don't have where it's colonizing and where it's, really posing a health issue, it's everywhere. You can't avoid it at this point. But what you can do is do the other work so that you're excreting and you're able to rid of that mold that's actually on a toxic level inside of your body. Being able to work around the fear around being exposed to that, like when you can work on regulating your nervous system and being able to live with more peace in your life, that's when your body can start to really do its job.
Totally. Yeah, it's a really important point. And, just to tie this into food for a second, because it was my first love, I was also learning, because for me, I am very, very sensitive to mold, right? Like, again, there's a spectrum of people. So you and I could be in the same home, the same car, the same diet, the same environment, and it may build up more in me and my body will overreact, and yours will, because you'll be able to process it out.
Right.
For me, I was like, okay, now that I'm aware how I react to high levels of mold, I actually need to be paying more attention to where mold is found in food. And I'm a big coffee drinker. And actually, one of the worst sources of mold is coffee.
So, I know, it's so sad.
It is, but there's also,
there's good ones out there.
Purity is like the best. I mean, literally, it's so pure, but they test every single batch. We had the co-founder on our podcast who told us literally, like, from the very beginning stages of the tree and harvesting those beans to the roasting stages, how they test for mold at every stage. So I'm like, okay, great. That's an easy swap. Like, I could do that. I could make sure, and again, be empowered and educated to make better choices. So I think the point of me saying that is like, it is really important to know where, if you are sensitive to mold, where those mold sources can be found, and being empowered enough to make the right choice without sitting in massive amounts of fear, because that is not going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just for the listener's sake, who tested you? Like you're working with this practitioner, correct? So like, what was the testing like? What kind of what was the first thing you were like, all right, I need to get rid of this? Like, what was your first step? Okay,
let me tell you one of the most maddening things. New York State doesn't allow most of the tests. So there's a mycotoxin urine panel. You're not allowed to get that in New York. No company will send it to you. You could go to Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, not New York. In the very beginning, before I knew that it was actually mold, I had gotten MRT, which is like a food blood test to test like your food allergies. I had to go to New Jersey for that. You can't send it out of New York. There's a lot of really, really, really restrictive, dumb rules in New York when it comes to health tests. So at the end of the day, how did I know? I knew because I was able to get out of the exposure and I healed. And then we confirmed it was mold. Okay. It was the shittiest thing that I had to be my own doctor in that moment.
Yeah.
And I wish there was one easy way of saying like, yeah, get this test and you're good. I did all of it. I did the stool testing. It didn't capture anything. I did, like I said, the blood work. And then at the end of the day, working with a practitioner who knows to ask the right questions, that's how we began our work together. But also I want to say like my regular blood work, like my thyroid, I was in like subclinical hypothyroid because my thyroid was getting tanked from the mold. My cholesterol, you would think what I was eating. I am a healthy woman and I eat all of the healthiest foods. There's nothing processed or artificial in my diet. My cholesterol was through the roof. And doctors were like, well, we'll gotta put you on a medication. I'm like, no, like cholesterol is responding to inflammation in my body. It's actually trying to help. So finding a doctor that understands that, right? Instead of being like, oh, let's go on Synthroid. Oh, let's put you on all these medications that you're going to be on for the rest of your life. And I think that was one of the scariest things is I felt like I had no one single person to go to say like, Ciara, it is okay. This is what we're going to do. Like even to this day, the practitioner that I'm working with, I don't think she was expecting for me to have such a healing crisis and such an intense detox period because I've been doing this for 1.5 years already. So I really wish I had a more succinct answer. I hope in the future, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, there's more information out there. I hope in the future there is an easier way to be able to know. But there is a mycotoxin urine test by Great Plains Labs. If you are able to get that out of state, great. It basically measures the amount of mycotoxins, so the toxins produced by the mold that's in your urine. But if you're exposed to mold and you're having symptoms, you got mold. Like you're dealing with mold toxicity. And yeah, I mean, it's really shitty to say that I feel like it was just me throwing spaghetti against a wall and seeing what was working and what wasn't. If I told you the amount of money I spent on practitioners and supplements and all this stuff, I mean, it was in the tens of thousands without question.
I'm so glad that you were able to get to a point where you actually did figure it out because I mean, some people would just give up.
Yeah.
Some people would give up and then they would go on blood pressure medication. They would go on, Synthroid or any type of other medications and you would still be having these symptoms.
Right. Because like, we didn't even talk about root cause, but like, yes, that's a root cause. The symptoms was high cholesterol and the symptoms was my thyroid tanking. Those are symptoms. Those are not causes. The cause was the mold. And unless you have a practitioner asking you the right questions, you need to find someone different. I always say this, like we talk about this ad nauseum on the podcast. If you have a doctor that doesn't want to listen to you, then you need to find a new doctor. They work for you. You don't work for them. They're
Reach.
Right? Like all the snaps, like they're on your team. You need to create a team. And I think also, if I could talk to Ciara even 5 years ago, I would say to her, don't look to one person to do it all. Be open to having a team. So have your team be your therapist, have your team be the very specific mold specialist that doesn't really do anything else. Have your team become more education. So whatever teachers you find. So this nervous system school, that's going to be a huge part of my healing with my panic and anxiety. But I couldn't look to anyone else on my team to do that. She's the expert in that, right? And then your spiritual community, that is just like, it's a non-negotiable. You need to have people that are going to love and support you and be there with you and be able to talk about the woo-woo stuff and like all of it. You need that.
You need it. I'm so glad that you brought all of this up because again, like this is also why I created the podcast.
Yes.
I created my business because of it. People, for example, part of my healing journey was writing my book.
Right.
I had to be the person to get all of the research from the other side of Western medicine and do I know everything? Absolutely not. I'm learning something new every day, but from what I had in that moment, in that time, gathering research and clearing the white noise for people who are in survivorship, who are even going through active treatment, those caregivers, those who are grieving, those who are maybe just nervous because they are genetically predisposed.
Right.
But again, I can so see you combining something with your like legal background and, you know, your holistic journey. Like, I feel like you're going to be going into this realm of like really like mold and like helping other people in that way. I don't know. I'm just getting that for you right now.
So it's so interesting you say that. When I, decided to take the bar exam again, I wasn't really sure why. It was just this ping I had that it was like, I need to finish that chapter. I put in so much time and effort getting my doctorate. And I'm like, I want to be a lawyer, but I think the kind of lawyer I would have wanted to be when I first graduated was very different than who I want to be now. And without really like getting too much into another story or a tangent, in the application process, I needed to do pro bono hours, 50 of them before I could apply. And I found this nonprofit called the Earth Law Center. And one of the projects they had me working on was your right to a healthy environment. So
I have full body pills.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, this is like literally created for me. Like literally nobody else coming out of law school would be more perfect to do this because I have personal knowledge. I'm an expert in holistic living. I know not all about, but like a really good amount about living and creating a healthy environment. And I think one of the interesting things, and I always use plastic as an example because plastic is such an endocrine disruptor. I'm sure you speak about that in your book, and it's like getting rid of the plastics. But how many times are we going to tell people to stop buying plastic versus let's hold these companies accountable for making the fucking plastics, for polluting our waters, for killing our thyroids, for making women infertile, from having all of these plastics around us. Literally, we can't escape them in our waters.
These companies are not being held accountable for all of the deaths, all of the disease that is being, is a product of that product. Yes. And, that medication or whatever it may be, like, it's bullshit. And I'm just glad more people like you are. And I always say, like, the journey is never easy. So it's like you had to unfortunately go through those trials and tribulations and bounce back and forth from going to learning about holistic living and holistic nutrition. And then you're like, wait, I need to finish up what I started a couple of years ago because I need this now. And you didn't know why. It was just like this feeling. And you're like, all right, I'm just going to roll with it.
That's part of the spiritual journey too, is being able to follow your intuition, right? And not getting like so bogged up in like, oh, what are they going to think about me? This isn't a good story. I should just stick with nutrition because that's what I'm doing. What am I doing going back to taking the bar exam 10 years later? Like, the stories that you could spin up in your own head. But the reality is like, I didn't tell anybody I was sitting for the bar. I'm like, this is for me. And if it doesn't work out, then that's okay. Like I tried, but if it did work out, this is going to be the story of a lifetime. And here we are, like, I'm just in the beginning stages. And as we speak, I actually got a job with the nonprofit. I'm working with them part-time. And so
amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. And I'm still doing my holistic stuff on the side. Like I'm in this very cool season of trying to figure out what jives, what makes me light up, what really fires me up. And it's both. And I don't want to give one up.
And you don't have to.
I don't. Yeah, it's like that's one of the most beautiful parts of like this season of life, and just knowing I can make my life whatever I want it to be. It's a blank slate.
That's it. And you said seasons too, which is very important because I see that people are almost too regimented. They're either too regimented or not regimented at all and just like have, no control over themselves. So it's like finding this happy medium, but also knowing that you're always going to go through different seasons of life. And I mean, we have seasons for a reason, right? Yeah. Winter, we're coming out of, we were in hibernation, self-reflection. You went through, right? And now you're coming out in springtime and being like, guys, this is what I learned. This is what I'm here to do and to help you out with so that you can take this information and I always say thrive in your health and your life, thrive in whatever it may be. Yeah. And it's cool that you're able to be creative out of it.
Yeah, it's lighting me up and I feel really good about it. And I'm like, I do feel on some level that the work I was trying to do one-on-one with clients for me didn't feel big enough.
Mm-hmm.
It was satisfying for a time, but I am like, I like big thinking. I like big ideas. I like that. And I'm like, this needs to be bigger than what I could do one-on-one in a session. And what I'm doing now is sort of like a 2.0 of what I was working on for my pro bono project. I'm doing research on the rights of future generations. So that is like 7 generations from now. What kind of planet are we leaving them? What kind of stories are we telling them? What is the nutrition that they're going to be having? Are they going to have monocrops and everything sprayed with glyphosate and every kid having ADD, ADHD, and all these things? Or are we going to have our school systems actually like fuel our children with healthy foods? I know I'm like going all over the place. This is what happens because I'm so
No, we
passionate
need
about
this.
it.
We
It's
need
so
this.
important. Yeah.
It's so important. We need this. We need people like you to take the lead. And people don't want to take the lead. They want to fall in line. They have one way of thinking. And like you said, you're thinking big. Like that's the point. You're here on this earth to do what? Like, what is it you want to do? And, you could either be the victor or you could be the victim.
Yeah.
And you could have easily, myself included, have fallen
Oh
into
yeah.
victim mentality. And I was there too, right? Like survivor.
Totally.
I'm like, why me? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And then you start to experiment and you're like, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this thing. I'm starting to, but it's healing is spiralic. So if you're thinking that, oh, okay, yeah, like I healed that thing, like whatever, like something else is going to come up. The universe, God, whatever you believe in isn't going to be like, oh, she gets 6 months time. No, like it's like one thing after the other until you can make more space.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing now with an open mind, a different viewpoint, and you're actually able to like walk and thrive through life instead of just being like a robot stuck in your conscious self, overthinking and just not even awake, honestly.
Yeah. And I'll also say too, like I struggled so much most of my life because I just tended to be countercultural for most things. And it's really hard when you do things differently than everyone around you. It's so hard to be the lone wolf. So I think obviously it goes back to like finding your community, which clearly we both have in many different ways, right? Like I have my nutrition community, then I have like my spiritual community. Sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. But I think too, like being able to step out of the norm, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's the right thing, right? It's like we need to change the narrative. We need to say like, hey, like see something, say something, right? Like the MTA little jingle. Like if you see something, say something. I'm like, hey, listen, I'm seeing that plastics are making us sick. I'm gonna say something. Like, and we need to make a change. So yeah, it's beautiful that you have this show that really people could come to and get expanded and explore in all different areas. And maybe some will resonate with some stories and not with others. And that's also okay too, right? It's like we all have our own journey and all of our stories are so different. But at the end of the day, it's like get educated, sit in an empowered state, and you're going to go to where you need to go.
That's exactly right. Are there any words of wisdom that you want to leave the people?
So the first thing that comes up is just healing is not linear, right? So I think in talking about health, I feel like that was the biggest topic that we had. There's ebbs and there's flows, there's seasons. Allowing yourself to feel all of the emotions that come through, because emotions are not bad. They're just little signals that your body is sharing something with you. So pay attention to them, right? Like I'm sure for you, there was a season of anger. There was a season of anger for me too. I was pissed. And it wasn't even like victim mentality. It was just like rage. Like I'm going to go flip every car in front of like that level of rage. And I'm like,
oh yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. And like, okay, for women, that's typically not allowed, but hey, it is okay. That's a natural feeling. Why am I feeling like that? And that's
Yeah.
it's okay to feel bad that you were, suffering from an illness, because it's a big deal. But don't stay there, right? Like, work through it, allow it to flow through, and find your support systems. I would say that that's just what comes to mind, and I hope that that speaks to someone listening, as just
Well,
words of wisdom.
I love that. Beautiful. Ciara, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at ORA Nutrition, ORA Nutrition. You could find us anywhere you could hear podcasts at the Fiercely Holistic Podcast. Obviously, my website, oranutrition.com. And I would love to connect with anyone that wants to connect. Like, yeah, building community is so important. So grateful for you to having me on. I'm wishing you so much success with your show and your book and all of it.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for you, girl.
Aww.
Oh, guys, if you like this episode, like, share, subscribe. You can check it out on YouTube as well, and where all podcasts are held. Until the next time, bye.
Bye.